ratio of the way that it's.
They're not doing it in the time frame they said.
Yeah, those are farmer councils.
You risk service levels.
So I think what's happening is we're doing
Nice.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of council for February 21st, 2018 at 7 p.m. held in the council chambers at the Town of Strathmore offices. That brings us to item number 2, confirmation of agenda. Are there any urgent matters from any of the council members? And are there any additions to the agenda from administration? Ms. Sawatsky.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we have one addition. It's under 4.2, and it is a delegation from the Crowther Memorial Junior High.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
I will move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is passed. Item number 3, presentations and recognitions. I believe we have nothing tonight, which brings us to item 4, delegations. And for those of you who are new to council meetings and to my new councillors, we haven't had very many delegations to us as a new council, but this is where we have people who come forward for a brief presentation who may want to address. And we're very fortunate and grateful tonight to have Mr. Martin Shields, MP for our area. So Mr. Shields, if you wouldn't mind coming forward and presenting to us.
Sure, thank you.
Welcome.
It's great to be here. It's on, right? You can hear me? Well, you can hear me without it anyways, right? It's great to be here again in the council and great to see the new council members here. And to the new council members, it's a lot less work than you thought it was gonna be, right? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, they didn't tell you about some of those other things that you might have to do. But it's a great challenge, and to see those who have been here before, you are committed to being here again for 4 years. You're not need to be committed, but it's great to see you back, because it is really democracy that you know that I believe in, having been 3 terms as the mayor of City Brooks, that it's our best level democracy. And when I spend time in Ottawa, I repeat that numerous times, as we are, as I am, 3,000 kilometers away from more than 30 weeks of the year. It's a long ways away from your constituents. You who are working at the grassroots democracy are in your community, making the best decisions you can for your friends and neighbors. And when it isn't as they think it is, you find out about it very quickly. And the best part about it, you know, you can try to make the best decisions you can, and sometimes our bylaws, we forgot something in it, you can fix it in a couple of weeks. We've spent the last 2 years watching the federal government change all the things that the past government did, and it's not a lot of new stuff. So that's what we seem to do a lot of. So, you know, I congratulate you for being here as a council, for working in your community. So there's just a few things that I would touch on that, I look at my notes. Rural crime is an issue. Back here last summer, as I was in the constituency and heard from people, I heard some issues, some concerns about it. And as the MPs got back to Ottawa, it seemed to be there was a number across Western Canada that had the same issues. So we always work in caucuses within the caucuses, so there's 29 Conservative MPs in Alberta. And as we got together, that seemed to be a topic, particularly in rural areas. So as we mentioned, we thought we should go out then and do something proactive with it. We knew the UPC party in Alberta was also working on it as a party out there amongst theirs, meeting with people with concerns about it, and they're looking at doing a report. So from December through to March, we're having town halls and rural meetings and meeting with councils and talking to people what their concerns are with what's called supposedly rural crime. As I've spent time in Alberta, the Alberta government looks at Edmonton, Calgary as those are the urbans and everything else is rural. Well, some of us think rural's a little different than that definition. So we are working at getting feedback as our provincial party And so, for example, last night I was in Keoma, and there was 50 people came out on a cold night in Keoma, and which was great. And we had people from a number of municipalities that came into that, and a lot of local residents. Also, the provincial MLA for the riding, Lee Laher, was there as well, and we did it together. I will be doing another one in a couple nights in Tabor, on the south end, and I think in the Vulcan area, though I met with the Vulcan County Council today, there's also the MLA is looking at organizing something there, and if he does, then I will be on that one. So, as municipalities, as municipal councils, you're very aware of how policing works, how it's funded. You as a community pay a percentage, it's the population you are, you contract for the positions that you want, and those are provided through the provincial agreement. It's a master agreement with the federal government, and so that's how you do it. Then once you have that local constabulary here in the positions, then your local RCMP are connected with you and report to you on a regular basis. Last night, your staff sergeant was in that meeting in Keoma, representing this community. So it was good he was there, and appreciate him coming out to that. There was the Southern Alberta Commander was also there, as well as 2 other RCMP staff members. So they've been very willing to come out to these meetings we've had around the province, from the north to the south, to talk about what people's concerns were. And I was the facilitator of the meeting, getting people to express what their concerns were. And there was a variety of things stated. And the RCMP were very good at responding to the people's concerns. And they had also stated last night a new piece that they're working with. There was a memorandum of understanding signed here with rural crime, in the sense of whether it's rural with different names, different kinds of community groups. There's 2 or 3 different names out there. Bob, those are back from your time that you would remember them. They may be named differently. There's an example, Carbon has been very active in this, and the mayor there has led that. So they have a very trained group. What happened in that community was several car thefts, break-ins, and the community organized their citizens on patrol in that community, got trained, and did a very good job, and it's an example of working with the RCMP and doing that. So that was, the mayor was there and explained what they had done in their community to work with that. So the RCMP explained that they are now, having signed this agreement, they're going to come forward and probably reestablish those programs that some of us may have remembered from the past, because they've dissipated. And for various reasons, whether staffing at RCMP or shortage of RCMP, whatever it has been, or the community volunteers got tired of doing it, any variety, they are now looking at refocusing and working with and reestablishing those groups throughout the communities, in the rural areas particularly. So it has just been announced. So questions I had, well, how do you find out about it? And they said, well, come to our detachments. What I asked them to do was to communicate it through the municipality organizations, the AUMA, the AMDNC, and with their local councils, to come out and meet with you and explain. It's only been 4 days that this program has been announced officially provincially, so their work at getting it out and the strategies haven't been fully defined, and they're working at getting that out. So hopefully that comes through your detachment of what they're talking about, because your detachment has people who work not only within your community, but in the outlying rural area. So that was the positive piece from the RCMP, that they're looking at reestablishing the connection through volunteer groups. There's still a lot of moving pieces out there in rural crime. The causes of it, solving it, resolving it, there's no magic bullet out there. It's a huge issue. But people are very concerned. Security within their own properties. It's one thing for the RCMP to say, if the property is being destroyed or stolen, don't put yourself at risk, because you being replaced is different than replacing it. But as you well understand, if you have invasion of your property in your home, or physical assault and that happening, it is very, very mentally challenging, in the sense you feel lots of emotional responses to it. And so it's hard to separate that if your vehicle is leaving the yard and not wanting to chase after it to try to stop it from happening. And when the RCMP say, don't do that, because you're putting yourself physically at risk. And they had a couple of examples of people having done that, where they did it, and it's actually happened in Carbon, and the mayor said one of our guys disregarded his training approached the vehicle, tried to talk to him in the middle of the night behind a store. That next day, the person from that vehicle was charged with a murder he had committed, and he had a gun. And they said, that's why the training is there, and that's why the mayor of that community says, we will now get into more of the training and make sure that it's safer for people to want to do it, but you got to follow that training. So that was an example from Mayor Carbon last night, very specific of why the training's important, why they need to be involved in providing that training to help these organizations that want to be involved in doing this as community volunteers. So, a couple other things that are out there. Legalization of marijuana. As we left last week, the Senate has the marijuana piece of legislation. The Senate's become an interesting place. There's the conservative caucus amongst them that were appointed by the conservative government, about 30. There's the former liberal senators, who the Liberal Party in the House said, you're no longer part of us. And then there's the new independent senators. Well, some of those independent senators have got to be very independent and very interesting of how they want to look at things. In the House, when we have a piece of legislation, it goes eventually to a committee if it's approved by passage. The committees are set up, the majority government has the majority members on committee, and they have a lot of power in the sense of how that is shuffled through that committee. In the Senate, it's much different because they can be very independent of how they approach a piece of legislation, not without necessarily that structure. So they have done a lot more study, a lot more witnesses with the piece of marijuana legislation. They're taking considerable time with it. They had invited anybody who wanted to come. They invited 5 pediatrician people who work in ERs. And it was really interesting because some of us from MPs went with the senators to listen to these. And these 5 doctors talked about the challenges they have now in the ER with people dealing with drug overdoses, with marijuana, and their concern about the brain interactive with young people with drugs, and marijuana being one of those. And what they were saying, this is what we will be faced with more so in the future. So it was sort of a description of their lifestyle of having to deal with drugs in youth and what they're predicting more will come. So it was a very informative session. But that's something the Senate has a little more time and variety of options to deal with looking at legislation. So it's really interesting to see that happen. So the Senate can sort of derail legislation. It can sit over there for a long time in their structure. But what they've agreed to with the government says, look, by sometime in June, we will have had a vote on this piece of legislation. What the government, I think, has realized that July 1st, even from their own party, is not a day that we want in Canada for having this declared legalized. It would be a very happy day in the country, I probably think, a celebration of a different kind. But they have suggested that if it's passed in June, it will take months before the provinces are all ready to implement it under their structures. The provinces have a lot of pieces that they have to implement to follow up with the legislation of how they're going to do it, and then that's got to be rolled out to you guys in how you deal with it in your community. Because there's a lot of small pieces that you have to establish under bylaws or the provincial legislation of what each province wants to do with this. But it's coming. So that's the timeline as of last Thursday that we were indicated that the Senate will pass it sometime in June. And then the rollout follows after that with the province and then with the municipalities. I'm sure your organization, AUMA, will be trying to keep you as informed as possible of what the things will happen with that one. Trans Mountain Pipeline is going to be an interesting piece. We're in an oil gas sector of Alberta, and the thing that I stated in the House the other day, trying to get people to understand the differential when you only have a monopoly in one place to sell your product. So, as many of you would know, our oil is discounted. If it's $60 a day on the world market, we sell it for $30 to the U.S. They know they're the only market, and they just discount it. McKenna, who is the former Premier of New Brunswick, is involved in sort of working, trying to resolve this one. But the numbers he brings out is 117 billion Canada has lost in the last 10 years. And so when I talk about it in the House, I said, it's like in Ontario, trying to get the Ontario guys to understand. you guys build cars in Ontario, lots of them. And so you say it's a $30,000 product, but you've only got one buyer. And he says, I'll only pay you $15,000 for it. So you gotta sell it. But then you need the car back. And he says, yep, now it's $30,000. So that's what we do with the oil. We ship it into the US, they load it on tankers in the Gulf of Mexico, bring it back to the New Brunswick refiners and sell it to us at market value. And that's why we need to get it to Tidewater. So it's blocked, and we lose probably a hospital a week and a school a day in this country because we can't sell it at market value. And that's tough for us. So that's why we keep pushing. The government has said this is a national priority. They know the money's involved. But boy, it's going to be fun trying to figure out how they're going to get that one done in BC. Lots of problems with that one. Canada Food Guide's another one that's an interesting one. I sat in on the Ag Committee a number of times. There's a move out there to have protein under the Canada Food Guide. As it is now, there's meat protein, there's other proteins, there's all sorts of stuff in the food guide. But there's a move to make meat protein is just a protein, and plant protein is taking the priority. Lots of good stuff in plant protein, but lots of good stuff in meat protein. And they're sort of downplaying the meat side of protein that they're talking about doing it. The one part that they just, as I talked about in the House, they want to label dairy products, and they backed away from milk, but they want to put a warning label on dairy products. And that one just okay, cheese has got a warning label on it? I have a problem with that one. So the food guide is the most downloaded document that the federal government has, which I didn't know, but it is the most downloaded document out there. We all want to be healthy. But to this point, they have refused to meet with producers in the dairy and meat industry. The science that those guys know, they say, well, they're vested stakeholders. We don't talk to them. And that's, I think, is wrong. They at least should listen to these guys from the dairy industry, meat products. But to this point, they've said, no, we don't want to talk to them. So that's something that may show up here that's interesting out there. I know within this community, I met with people talking about hospices, palliative care. And I know there's communication coming back and forth, but just mentioning, I've talked with the health minister. There's $200 million that they have shared with the provinces with health. Now, they've got $6 billion in your budget that they're talking about, but they haven't got it out there. So when they talk about palliative care and hospice, they've got money in their budget. When I talk about $6 billion, only 200 out, but they have to work with the provinces to some kind of work out the agreements on how they're going to do this. So, as I talk with the health minister, she says it's important, hospice, palliative care, and they've got money on the table. They've got money listed in the budget. And so it comes through the provincial health, and I know you've talked to them, I know you know how it works, but at least we know that money's there on the table, that $200 million is out the door, and there's $6 billion left in the budget that they've committed to in 2017. So, as we find that, the minister tells us that. Now, to get it to the other level is the tough piece. So, we'll write you, I know we're communicating officially with the group that I met from here, with you, Denise, and so we'll get that out and continue working with it. Dialysis, I know you have worked with that. I've talked with Mr. Cooper in the community. I worked on that in 10 years in Brooks, 10 years. To try to get dialysis in Brooks. One of the challenges I had with that, they would always talk about the numbers. You haven't got enough numbers. Well, it's pretty hard up and down that highway all the time, and those people often move out of your community. They lose their support network, their families, whatever else, and they die because they're not where they should be. And so that's always the challenge we had in Brooks, is trying to convince them there was numbers. Getting the Alberta Health, so they said, well, if you raise some money. So Brooks is on a plan of raising $1.5 million. They're up to 700 and some thousand now towards that. But it's no guarantee, because they said, we'll consider it if you raise some money, which has always been and I've grinded on this one a long time, as I support it, but I said, guys, they never said they would do it for that. They said they would consider it. And if these people in our community raise $1.5 million and get turned down, that's a pretty ugly message. So I know in your community, as I've talked to Mr. Cooper, putting people on the road, you're usually talking about seniors, you're talking winter conditions, that's a tough one. Those services, it's a challenge. So I don't have any answers for the dialysis. It's a provincial, and it hasn't been a federal one, but anything I can do to help and encourage, I can. I know Siksika may be a flyer on this one. And that's what I encouraged them on. I said, if Siksika can do something, then you tag along and see what you can do, because they have different options that you don't have. So if you can connect anywhere with Siksika with this, and there seems to be a connection between Mr. Cooper, and so I said, well, use it for all you're worth, because that may be the only option you've got. So that's something I've talked about. Today, I had the pleasure of visiting your new renovated library. What a delight. You have a facility now that you walk in there, you walk in the door, you're in the library. You know, and that's so nice. You're actually right in the library, right in the front door. They've got space that they can have functions in. You were there this morning, I believe.
Yep.
Seniors Coffee event, that big, beautiful room to host something in. That's a facility now that they can use for lots of things. But you walk around the library, the staff's so proud of it and so excited about their library. So, you know, as I say to libraries, and you know I've got a library background, and I said to the staff, you know, you are the most used service in this community. So what do you mean? I said, how many days a week are you open? Well, 6. How many evenings are you open? Well, 5. I said, can you tell me of another government service that provides that many hours of service in your community? Oh, didn't think of it that way. Well, you do, because you are a critical service in your community, because just the hours you're open, that people come in, they can ask you questions, they can look for things, because they know you're open. So I think you've done a great job in helping your library in this community, and it was a delight to be there today. So thank you for what you've done with your library service, because that's a key service to me in a community. So on that, if you've got any other questions, comments?
Councillor Sobel.
Well, thank you, sir, for that presentation, all that information. It's always good to see you, and I think we're a lucky community to have you as our MP, and you're always very willing to provide information, and good information too, right from Ottawa, where everything happens.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Not all good, but everything happens. So my question, Martin, was in regards to the, actually I have 2 questions. One is in regards to the decision by the RCMP to restart some programs that they let go. I can probably guess at why the programs kind of faltered. It's a manpower issue. And I also know that from previous experience that, especially with crime, with property crime offenses, they're very, they can take a lot of manpower up very fast and for fairly lengthy periods of time. It's just that type of investigation where one search warrant leads to another, and you end up with a warehouse full of property that you then have to get back to the proper owner. So it takes a lot of manpower. Was there any discussion at all about adding to the rural contingency in our province, which I think is woefully low?
You know, and absolutely a great question, and one that I've probably said in a few places and been very blunt about it. They're not willing to talk about it. The RCMP won't touch that one. That's above our pay grade. And you know, some of the rural guys are beginning to look at other options. You know, you've got the 2 levels of municipal enforcement that you pay beyond that, beyond the RCMP. The rural guys are trying to figure out where they could go in the middle of this. Do they buy a police officer at $165,000 all in? So that's something to look at as a dedicated. Chestermere and Brooks, we bought the dedicated service. For us in Brooks, it was traffic, and we bought 40 hours a week. And we didn't care which one of them was doing it, and they had lots of young guys who liked the overtime. And we did that for very specific. Chestermere, I'm not sure under what their specific above their contract for service, but they've got one of those. So I know the counties have begun to listen to that as, hey, there is an option. You can buy a dedicated position to do a specific thing. So I know there's been some discussion of that in some rural municipalities. MDF Tabor have hired 2 former RCMP, and they're looking at that. What they found was, and what they agree wasn't what came up in the meetings, is these people work the daylight hours. And most crime happens between midnight and 6. And that's a problem when you get into that supplementary service. So there's been some, is that a way to go or not? Is a regionalized police force is a topic that has come up in a different way? Do we have a different kind of arrangement with policing forces? So people are looking for options of how to maximize and get a result. The RCMP will often talk about hardening of the sites where people go. Have you got a dog? Do you have yard lights? Have you locked gates? Are your all vehicles? So the RCMP will come back to this will help us if the residents will do what they call hardening, and you're familiar with that topic of making it as tight as you can on your own property. So there's a variety of those discussions I've heard in the past months, and no answer. But we are short what I would agree with boots on the street. I think we're short of boots on the street until we get more boots on the street and visible. And in those critical hours, when somebody's phoning at 3 in the morning, that's when the RCMPs are also at their shortest staff levels. And that, again, creates that problem of if you're in rural, and I had a couple people came out from Calgary, came out of interest. Because if you're in the city of Calgary and you call, somebody's going to show up in a fairly reasonable time because of the distance factor. Rural, it could be an hour.
Good.
Easily. It could be 2 hours. And the crooks know that.
Yep.
They're not stupid. They're looking for the cheapest advantage to getting something quickly and out of there. So that's the problem, is that time delay. And will more boots on the street fix that? I'm not sure, but I know we're short.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Great. And my second question, and I asked you this for a comment on it, and I don't mean for you to go into any great detail, but is there anything new in regards to equalization payments?
That's, I've got a short version of the equalization document, and it's 9 pages long. I've heard some people say that nobody understands the equalization document because it's so long and complicated. One of the things that we do know is Quebec, under its plan, hydro is not included as a form of revenue. It's not included, where oil and gas are.
Right.
And so that's always been an irritant in the West, is how come Quebec hasn't got that included?
Yes.
And so that's always a Western position, that we would like that included in it to balance that out.
It would make a difference.
Yeah, it would make a significant difference because they have a huge amount of hydro and more coming online with the Muskrat Dam, so that's a huge one. It is a very complicated one and a very challenging one to try to deal with, but the renegotiation will come up by 2019. Will it change? I don't know, but it will be a tough thing to deal with. But one that comes up in Alberta very often.
I'm sure you and your colleagues will be right at it.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Shields. So I guess one question that popped into my mind while you were speaking is what exactly is the warning label going to be on dairy products?
We don't know, other than suggesting it would be there. They're talking about cholesterol. What are the things in cheese that if you ate a ton of cheese, it might be dangerous to your health? And we say, well, you drink a ton of water, it's going to be dangerous to your health. But there is things in cheese they would say is not the most healthy thing to be. All we know is they're talking about warning labels because of that, of the fat content, the different things that they would see in dairy products. But they backed off from milk, saying that, well, it's got calcium, it's good for kids, and so that's one thing I heard, that they would back off from that.
Okay. And my other question is, aside from some of the ones you mentioned, is there any upcoming ways to attract more federal tax dollars to our municipality?
Good question.
Sorry.
That's all right. The infrastructure money, the numbers that you see, and the Minister Sohi, which is from Edmonton, and I've known him because he used to be on the Alberta Municipality Board and I was on it at the same time, so it's somebody I can talk to. They have been very slow and very hard to get the infrastructure money out that they've announced. The majority of it is still sitting in Ottawa for the projects they have that are out there listed. So they haven't moved the millions and millions, the hundreds of millions, they haven't moved them out yet for the projects they are approving. It's been a bottleneck, severe. So that even the ones, and you may not have been approved for any, but even the ones they have approved, the money isn't flowing. It's just been a bureaucratic nightmare. And, we know that the province has the lists, they approve the list provincially. We know that the feds sign off on those projects. But it's been a very, very slow process. So getting more out, the feds have a lot in their budget. They have billions in their budget. Now, as you well realize, there's somebody in between the municipalities and the federal government, and that's the province. I remember the year, and you would remember as well, that when Highway 63 had severe accidents to Fort McMurray, and the provincial government said, this is now a priority, we need to get that twinned all the way through. That year, we never saw much for infrastructure money at the provincial level, from the municipal level. The province can mandate some priorities, and they can redirect to their own, what they want to have it done. So there is the challenge, is to work with the province, and that's your organization, and I know they work hard at it, is trying to keep that money flowing to projects that you submit and that you need done. So that's the challenge, is to get it through that provincial piece. Now, MSI has been a pretty good piece from my understanding and my involvement. MSI, it's been a very good project for municipalities to do money as they so choose, and they do very well at it. I'm hearing rumblings, and I don't know what you're hearing, at the risk of where that program is.
Done. Done.
They're not going to renew it?
2019 looks like it's done.
That's the end of it, but will they renew it?
Depends who's there.
Yeah, right, good point. But that's an incredible, important program for municipalities, the funding that comes from MSI. It has allowed municipalities to do a lot of work in their communities and have the ability to make decisions about where it needs to go. Rather than directed grant that you apply for a project and this is where it has to go, MSI allows you flexibility to move that money where you think it needs to go. So direct grant funding for projects is a very long process, and one I prefer the MSI style, where you get a lump of money and you decide. So we're being held up now by a grant process of people applying. Now, could I say where the majority of money has gone from the federal approved projects? Would I be very political and say something about where the majority of which kind of ridings it's going into? Or would I say, oh, you bet, it's going into the Liberal ridings, vast majority. So that's
Okay.
another problem.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep,
Thank you, Councillor
not a good
Montgomery.
answer for you.
Councillor Peterson.
And I would just add to that, the large urbans have beautiful ring roads. I really, really appreciate the work that you've put into our community in helping people who are marginalized. People at their very worst days have really are articulating a lot of support. They know what you're doing. So whether they're people involved in rural crime, I wish we would have been in Keomia last night. We were meeting with our county counterparts talking about rural crime. But we knew you were doing the same. People needing end-of-life care, dialysis, all of those things. And I'm extremely appreciative of how you've been able to move that agenda forward. And Siksika has reached out to the community, understanding that their numbers are so significant. They're outside of the 100-kilometer range, which we're not, and have said that they would welcome people from this community partnering and sharing in anything that they're able to accommodate. In relation to that, one of the things that I've been hearing about is that the memorandum of understanding that was struck between the province, or between the federal government and what was INAC, now has split into two departments, and it's causing a great deal of of difficulty in terms of trying to find our way through that morass. And it impacts municipalities like ours who want to form relationships with our neighbors. And they're saying that they are really unclear of how that's going to roll out. They're really impatient with the huge inequities in health and child welfare and education. And they know that those two have now been split off from the infrastructure piece. And so if there's any assistance that you can give to municipalities like ours to help build bridges, to our Indigenous community neighbors, we'd be really, really appreciative of that, because we're kind of lost too. We just don't have the information. And they're kind of saying the same thing. And the other thing that I wanted to note as well is that in our talks with our county neighbors, and when they talk about, they have been thinking very definitely along the lines that you're talking about in terms of bylaw enhancement, local municipal enforcement, and fish and wildlife, and all of those too. So it's good to be able to come together, and I'm sure your input has been important in that. And the last thing, I just want to thank you for your input into allowing our community to report around issues for Indigenous peoples with the status of women. I'm greatly appreciative.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for the very kind words. I really appreciate that. The splitting of the two departments, or splitting it into two departments, if you can imagine, one of the largest government departments that we have, and then they said, we're splitting it, the amount of work it's trying to figure out who's working on what, who's working where, is a nightmare that's ongoing. When a question is asked in the House, we don't know which minister will stand up, because we don't know which one's doing which. Because I think they've sort of cleared between the two ministers who's responsible for what, but to separate those into two huge departments, it's a very tough thing for the Indigenous people to try to navigate that. Who do we talk to? Where do we go? I mean, they're reaching out for me to make appointments with ministers because they don't know where to go anymore.
No, they're really worried.
Yeah. On that last point, which was,
The status of women.
yeah. We were fortunate enough to have 3 people from this area testify at the Status of Women Committee. When I submitted the names, they were a little curious to why this old white guy would know anything or know anybody that might have an opinion on this, which I found, okay, that's fine, I understand that. And they finally accepted those names. And I really appreciated you people stepping up and testifying in that committee. Well, that was great.
And then the committee actually came back and asked for additional names.
Yeah.
And then other people from the community also
Yeah.
participated in addition, so,
Yeah,
it was
Which is
really,
great.
it was
So-
really good, yeah.
no, I really appreciate you stepping up and willing to do that.
Yeah. We had lots of input from the community going forward, so I really am grateful.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Are there any other questions or comments? We wanted to thank you for attending tonight and reporting on what's been going on and keeping us abreast of things. On behalf of council, I'd like to thank you for your advocacy for our area, our town, and thank you for staying so well informed on the things that are going on in the area, and for going to bat for individuals like Mr. Cooper and Mr. Geiger as far as the dialysis. And before you leave, we have a small presentation for you, and if my fellow councillors could come up.
With pleasure. Oh, well, if he's gonna do that, then I want a picture of this. Would that be all right?
Oh, sure.
Oh, good.
Sure. So we can get somebody to take. Oh, yeah.
Come on in,
Martin would be better, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so, they're very kind of look.
No problem.
Didn't know you'd get drafted, did you?
Yeah, it happens. Probably 10 of them on
July
there,
tree
so
special.
pick which is good.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, your worship.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for the question. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
We just met
Thank you again, Mr. Shields, and safe travels from here. That brings us to item 4.2, and we have a delegation from Crowther Memorial Junior High. At this point, I'd like to welcome Michelle Beauregard, who is the Career and Technology Foundations teacher at Crowther Memorial. And she has a proposal from her design class, and I believe you have one student with you, or are there a couple? One student, you're a brave person to,
Keep an eye out, this girl can go places.
excellent.
She's taken a bit of a leave from her air cadets tonight to be here, and the kids are on a week off.
Right.
So I think I had 4 or 5 kids who were gonna come if it had been a regular school week, but some are in Saskatchewan and elsewhere, so it's just me, but I represent 29 grade 8s. With the new CTF curriculum, Career Technology Foundations, we're evolving it. It's an optional implementation this year, so we're doing a lot of design thinking in my grade 8 class. And we're watching some of the local social media prior to Christmas as the news was rolled out that we were gonna have these garbage bins, which I thought was a great idea. I lived in Olds 20 years ago. We had those garbage bins. I thought it was super, but didn't seem like social media was agreeing with me quite so much. So we put some thought into this. And so just to give you a bit of an insight into my program, I've overhauled it to be more of a STEM program, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. There's a lot of design learning, problem solving, entrepreneurship, data management, and we're really trying to bring citizenship into it. I think when we're dealing with teenagers, citizenship, they always have good ideas. You know, I've watched some of the news unfold in light of this most recent mass shooting, and I watched these kids marching to the government office. I think kids have everything. They've got hope, they've got ideas, they've got guts, they've got courage, and they're not cynical. And our future as kids, that's why I do what I do. So we started talking about, why are people so upset about garbage bins? Somebody gave you something. Usually when somebody gives you something, you smile, you say thank you, and it's all good. So we noticed that residents were taking to social media to complain about these bins. What's the problem? It's a bin, holds garbage, saves the garbage bins back, holds a reasonable amount of trash. And it took us quite a while to figure out what we thought maybe the problem was. And it was when we got talking about wind that it occurred to us, you know, we get a fair bit of wind in Strathmore. When I first moved to Strathmore, I asked somebody, is it always windy until the end of June? And they said, yes, every single year. Okay, I'll get used to it. So the problem we wondered, is it the wind? Because the bins all now look identical, and I know the number on my bin, but if I came home after school one day and all the bins in my street had blown down to the end of the street, my first inclination would be to try and return the bins to their homes. Except I would only know the number for my own bin, and that selfishly, I would only be able to take my bin out of the pile. I wouldn't be able to help a neighbor. So how could we be good neighbors and return the bins when they all look identical? So that was a conversation we had. And so we did a little litmus test. We have a vinyl cutter as part of our design learning in there, and we're cutting with Oracal 651, the professional quality indoor-outdoor grade vinyl. So we cut a label for my garbage can, which you can see illustrated on the screen, and we wondered if the lack of identification was maybe the bigger problem, and maybe it wasn't about bins, or it wasn't about extra item garbage tags, or whatever the other rhetoric seemed to be that was glossing over, making it blurry to what really is the problem. The bins belong to the town, not to the homeowner, so therein we're responsible for something that is actually not our personal item. We know the town can trace it, but we wondered if we were able to just label it our address, might that take some of the ire out of this? Because it really did boggle me that this was such a hot topic. So I pitched it on social media. If my Design 8 kids produced consistent labels, they all look the same font, everybody's looks the same, designed to go on top of the lid, and we charge you $5 for it. Would you want one? And within 24 hours, I had 100 responses. So I stopped collecting responses then, because we thought, you know, we've got this overwhelmingly positive feedback, seems like a good idea, but again, I'm a teacher. Proper procedures and protocols. You don't just start doing something without asking the people who actually own the garbage bin, do you mind if we do this to your garbage bin? So we talked in class and we decided we should put together a presentation and come down here and talk to you and exercise what we've learned in school about municipal governments and ask, is this something that might be potentially helpful to the residents and the citizens of Strathmore to have the option? If it's really truly bothering them, but they can't tell which is their garbage bin or their neighbor's garbage bin, we do have a potential solution. So we want to follow policy and come down and pitch our idea. So ultimately the proposal would be 110 Design, and that's what we've called our little design group now. Would like to offer labeling services to the residents of Strathmore. We use Oracal 651 outdoor rated vinyl. We would do them all in white. Total consistency. The label that says Strathmore from factory is white. We will go with the same thing. $5 per address label. We've had residents ask us, can I get 3? Because I know, you know, there's some people who are reading their Strathmore news and they know there's more bins coming, and can I just have 3 right off front so when the other bins arrive, I'm ready to go. They're standardized and they're designed to fit on the lid of the bin. So, more logistics. We haven't gotten into our further logistics because we're not going to put the cart ahead of the horse, but the CTF curriculum is founded on the idea of challenge, where it's my job to issue challenge to the students and it's their job to figure, you know, much as a career would require you to do. Your boss is constantly giving you challenge and you've got to use your resources, whatever those be. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to take orders. We've got lots of good ideas already on that. Creation of labels, we certainly have the ability to do that. Collection and tracking of payment, I've got some ideas in my back pocket for that, and the delivery of the completed labels. So I've got 29 kids who are prepared to take on those 4 challenges, pending approval that we would be allowed to do this. So if we're approved for this service, we certainly have our work cut out for us, but we are up for the challenge to do this. So yeah, conclusion. So I guess we hope that Strathmore Town Council will approve our request to offer the citizens this opportunity. There are a couple different angles. Now I have made a point of telling people my labels look a little crooked on there, but it's an illusion from the lights in my garage creating that. There's a perfectly straight line on the transfer tape, and my label on my garbage can is completely and totally straight. So, and we figured $5 per cost is basically just going to cover our cost of consumables, but I think that the learning opportunity that I can provide for kids is pretty solid. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for presenting to us. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question that may be in more in the purview of planning, and that is we've had some concerns raised about the lids themselves departing from their from the bottoms of the bins. I'm not sure if that is an issue or if that's just a social media.
Well, certainly we won't be applying them, we'll be providing them to the homeowner.
Right.
If they felt, I guess
Yeah.
if they felt it would be better on the side or front.
I just would like the opinion of.
There's been a couple defects on the lid, there's been more with the wheels, not
Yeah.
as many as people have been saying, there's been some defects with the wheels as well. I think this is a great idea, I love it. The only thing that would concern me a little bit, if we get a damaged cart, our tendency for us would just be to go pick up the cart and replace it with a brand new one. Just because of logistics, because we have to go take it,
Right.
public works guys, we
Yeah, I
should just
follow
grab
what
a
you're
new
saying.
one, drop it on, re-tag it, take the old one back. So the person that purchased $5 sticker would then lose it. So maybe one of the suggestions would be providing an extra one just in case, or because
Yeah.
this process, that might not happen for 2 or 3 years, and you might not be doing the service anymore, and they'll go, I want to have another sticker replaced because I got the other 2 bins or 3 bins with that.
Okay.
But as far as administration and my department, I think it's a great idea to keep in the right location. Yeah, we can use our scanners and figure out where it has to go, and we'll go back to the right spot, but you guys don't have a scanner, so it's not.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because it seemed so hostile, it seemed so aggressive, and I think in the end, from what I got from it, it was really more of a neighbor helping neighbor issue. Which, you know, I have to say, my heart felt better drawing that conclusion than some of the other potential conclusions that could come from that.
So hopefully that should,
Yeah, it does, it does. Your worship, if you want to, for the sake of discussion, I have a motion prepared if you want.
Okay, and then we'll
Then we
just,
can discuss it, continue.
okay, thank you.
So it would be my great pleasure to move that council grant approval to the students of Samuel Crowther Memorial to make and market labels at a cost of $5 per label for the Strathmore Communities bins.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. So we have the motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? I think Councillor Sobel, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment. Thank you for the presentation. I got to say, I completely support this. One of the first things I did was I went out and purchased the tags, the numbers for my house, and it doesn't match anything to what my house is now. It's I obviously need new ones, or I have to order these. Because I'm missing some of the digits. They don't last as long as I think these will. But I was going to actually ask if there was a particular reason why you chose the lid for the label, or was that just for
I
visibility?
thought that long-term, that would probably be the spot that would be least likely to have residue from the trash. You know, I've washed myself for a few weeks, and I open it with clean hands, and I put, bags dump out, and the lid falls out of the way when the garbage
Yeah.
is falling out. So I was just looking for the spot that's least likely to get a big glop of Coke or ketchup or something
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, that's,
But I may not have picked the
no,
best
you know,
spot for that.
I'm not sure, like, Mark brings up an interesting, and one I hadn't thought of, so I'm wondering if how hard it would be to just, if you had to replace the bin, how hard these lids are to take off and pop on a new one rather than incur an extra $5. I don't even know if that's possible. The first thing I thought of when I saw them on the lid was that, of course, when they pick them up, the lid goes over and
Yeah.
smashes into the back of the
Interesting.
garbage of the cart. So I'm wondering if it would ultimately.
I do have one letter now on that that's loose, but I attributed it to the fact that I applied that when it was -40.
Well, yeah,
stuck my decals
I
down
think
when
that
it
was the same
-40
same
out,
issue
so-
I had as well. So
maybe it was my fault, but
Yeah.
it very well could be a placement.
ultimately, it
Yes,
will be a
that.
decision by the homeowner to make.
Right.
But it'd be nice to recommend somewhere that we felt was appropriate anyway.
Well,
I'm not
maybe
gonna.
just as well to put it underneath
I
that
don't-
sequence of numbers that appears on the side.
Yeah, I'm not gonna overthink this,
Of
but I
course.
I totally support the idea, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to say thank you guys for coming forward. You know, everybody saw the bashing on social media, and these kids rose above, and they were looking for a solution themselves. And I really want to commend you guys for that and for coming. And I am fully in support of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Councillor Cox.
Hi,
Hi.
I have a couple things I just wanted to add. I actually did want to know what the $5 was covering, if your costs were being completely covered, are they?
I believe so.
And would, suggestion-wise as to, giving to or whatever, I like that idea because it can be replaced, but I want to make sure that you guys are covering costs.
Yeah.
My next thing is did anybody tell you that we're not sure on the size of the next two?
No.
So
nobody's mentioned-
I believe the green one is up for debate as to a size.
Okay.
So that could make,
I hear you, I follow exactly.
Okay,
what you're saying, And I do have
okay.
the contact information, and I'm happy to put that information back to people who've suggested they'd like all three at once and say, we're not sure on the sizing for the next ones. Do you want to stand by that, or do you want to just go for one for the time being? I can certainly.
okay. And then my next comment was along the lines of what Mark had said. This is 29 students this year at this time.
Right. The program will continue to run. These 29 will be out, and then we'll have to, we'll probably have to bring a couple of them in to help apprentice the new incoming ones. But we've got a number of design-based and I like to call them toys, because I think that play and learning are synonymous. So I've got a room full of all kinds of different design toys, and they'll all have a chance with some of the vinyl cutter. Down the road, I would like to be able to expand into some further design. Budgets are always limited, and so we're trying to be a little innovative here with our thinking and how we're approaching bringing some of these more costly programs in, but they're so necessary for these 21st century learners. So I'm thinking outside the box a little bit here with this
Excellent.
program and just trying to provide as many opportunities as I can for these kids.
Excellent. I would really like to see you continue and make sure that, you know,
Yes, I would
even
like
our,
this to be a program, I mean, my grade 7 program where I run businesses is 15 years going now, so I'd
Awesome.
like to see this one
Excellent.
have the same kind of longevity, whether it's under me or it's under
Thank you.
someone else in my classroom.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I want to say I appreciate like what you're doing as far as teaching the kids about kind of business and whatnot. So I think that's good. One thing that popped into my head though is if you guys administration could tell us if there's anything in the bylaw that precludes people putting stickers on their own bins. Okay. That was all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Otherwise, you're in big trouble.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Michelle, thank you for coming forward with your class. Oh, Councillor Peterson.
One of the other things that I was thinking about when I knew that you were coming forward with this, I know that I'm going to be really tired of phoning my grandchildren to say what goes in the black bin, what goes in the green bin. And I'm wondering if you could add QR codes. Would that be something in the future, that
Definitely.
we could just look at it and say, oh yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Sky's the limit.
be wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Once again, Michelle, thank you for coming forward and presenting to us with your class and your students for being involved. I appreciate the unique approach they've taken and their creativity to follow a project we approved and also find ways to try and add to it. So, councillors, we have a motion on the floor. I think you all remember it. All in favor of Councillor Peterson's motion? And the motion is carried unanimously. So again, congratulations to your design class, and please pass along our thanks for their interest.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This brings us to item 5.1, the minutes of the February 7th, 2018 regular council meeting on page 3, starting on page 3.
So move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. You've all heard the motion to accept the minutes as presented. All in favor? I thought I'd hesitate there. Motion is passed. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Cox. There are no tabled items for tonight, which brings us to item 7, items for administration. 7.1, the electrical franchise fee 2018, which is on page 11 of the handout. Mr. Teedy, if you wouldn't mind coming forward to present.
Thank you, Your Worship. The electrical franchise fee adjustment was part of the 2018 budget package that was approved in December this past year. The current franchise fee for electricity paid to the town is presently 13.5% and raised $858,000 in revenue in 2017 and $663,000 in 2016. Revising the franchise fee rate to 15% would increase the average monthly residential fee from $779 per month to $888 per month, an increase of $1.09 per month based on the average residential use of 625 kilowatt hours per month. Franchise fees are paid by all utility customers. All provincially funded institutional schools, senior lodges, pay no taxes, and this is the only form of revenue that we receive from those institutions. If you recall, when the budget was approved, the budget called for $807,000 to be used from reserves to balance the budget for this current year. And one other thing that we talked in some detail about was from the years of 2014 to 2018, there was an actual decrease on the average taxes by $90 per property based on a $300,000 assessment. The taxes were reduced from $2,529 in 2014 to $2,439 in 2017. The franchise fee electrical rates in the surrounding area, Airdrie is at 13%, Brooks 12.63, Chestermere 11.5, High River 20%, Okotoks 10%, Cochrane 15%. The average of those is 13.7. And so we were at the 13.5. So we were average last year, and we're proposing that the adjustment go to 15%.
Thank you, Mel. Councillor Sobel.
Just a quick question, thank you, Your Worship. Is that, those numbers that you just provided, are those 17 numbers or 18 numbers, or do you know?
Those were the numbers that I received from Fortis, and those are the current numbers that they supplied.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. So while I was kind of, I guess, researching this, I thought of something. I just wonder, like, do you know what the value of the tax-exempt land in Strathmore is, roughly?
No, I don't offhand.
Okay. And as far as like Strathmore's franchise fees, are those are calculated on distribution charges only?
Distribution and consumption. The consumption of the electricity.
Okay. And I guess like, so what rate, so we're applying a 15% in this example charge to the consumption, like the amount consumed as well as the distribution charge then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then I guess my final question, and this is applicable to both of these, will the town be looking to increase franchise fees again, and if so, when?
Franchise fees can be reviewed at the pleasure of council. We have put in small increases over the next couple of years. Because we're not at a balanced budget, there's a need to increase each of the revenue streams. And until we get to a point where we're putting some money away, we'll be looking at different options. The budget was $807,000 short last year, or for this current 2018 year, and this is just one of the revenue streams that the town utilizes as far as income.
So you said we're gonna be 807,000 short?
That was the transfer from reserves that we included in the budget, yes.
Okay. So like when we were looking at like those tax changes and there was like that 100 and something thousand surplus, that would be including that 807,000 transfer?
The additional, you're referring to the additional business tax allocation? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, like we raised residential and non-residential, and we were projecting a surplus of 150 something.
That was just additional revenue from that,
Okay.
from the business taxes, not a surplus,
Okay,
not
I
an
see.
overall surplus.
Okay. So I guess like, what do you project is gonna be the end of these fees? Are we looking to max them out, or have you guys kind of projected what they should be ideally?
I don't think council has spoken to that issue. I couldn't comment beyond what we've included in the 3-year budget. And there was some additional fee increase in each of the subsequent years. Very small amounts, though. As this is a small adjustment, it equates to about $150,000 for the town for the current year.
So like at the end of the 3 years, what are you projecting that we'll be at for these franchise fees?
I don't have a specific number other than what we've looked at right now.
Okay, and have you guys looked at any other types of, let's say, local access fee models or franchise fee models? Like I know some of the bigger municipalities have different calculations and ways of kind of figuring it out. Have you guys looked at any other methods for calculating this?
I'm not sure I understand the question. The fee is based on this percentage, but if you're asking, are we planning on moving it a lot or a little? The 3-year budget does have small increases.
Well, like what I'm referring to is, so for instance, like the city of Edmonton, they have a model where I believe they tax the property that the utilities would use, but then they're also charging the utility a franchise fee on top of that. And one of the, and I guess like the other question I have is related to the, I'm assuming the amount that we would take in would be kind of somewhat dependent on the price of the electricity or gas. Is that correct?
Yes, because
Okay.
the revenue is based on total, or the franchise fee is based on the total bill to the customer, with the exclusion of some of the riders.
Okay.
It's a formula specified by the province.
Mr. Thackeray, did you want to weigh in on Councillor Montgomery's point?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the city of Edmonton has its own utility, which is EPCOR, so they own it, so it's a different model. We don't own our own utility. It's just the model that we have is what's used by any of the other municipalities in a similar boat than we are. I think to add to more to what Mel is saying, if I may, through the chair, ultimately, I think there are more conversations and dialogue to work with council and support council on their long-term financial strategy. And as was brought up earlier, there is concern that MSI is going to change on us and it will have a significant impact on us. And we hope for the best, but I think we know there's going to be some changes, and it's going to require more revenue just to maintain. And we can argue, there's lots of things I'm sure we'll try and advocate with Edmonton and Ottawa, but we need to be prepared, and that's why we put forward the long-term financial strategy. And we think this aligns with it. And as Mel said, there are increases proposed. They are not agreed to yet because we still have more to do. And that we'll be getting a lot more into it this year with the council's strategic initiatives and just how this is all going to play out with Edmonton. It's going to be tricky. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thackeray. Anything else, Councillor Montgomery?
I guess, do you feel like we are raising it enough at this point? Should we be raising it more?
The idea was to not cause a burden on the homeowner. And to answer the question, in 2019, the franchise fee for electricity goes up less than $10,000 in that year and a further $10,000 in 2020. So very small increases is what we have put in, but those can be modified and adjusted annually depending on the need of the budget.
Okay. And I guess here's something that I guess occurred to me. I understand the idea of, if we can kind of, take more money from, these places that we can't tax their property, that then we therefore don't have to raise our property taxes, that same amount. But doesn't the province basically just kind of whatever we would tax or, whatever we would kind of franchise fee these institutions, doesn't the province just tax the people and take that money anyways? And so we're just kind of creating like a loop basically of an institution needs money, so then they tax somebody, and then, we have to tax somebody, and then like, does it, like, I guess, like, do you think it works out, like, by, like, in the end, to have just kind of money getting taken in a kind of circle, I guess?
I can't answer that directly, although each of the provincial organizations have their own budget, and we have ours, and we try to work within the parameters that we have to work within. We've established this long-term financial plan, and we're trying to work within it and do the best we can and take the high road and do and talk about what we can do, and that's about all.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you answering my questions, Mel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Cox?
Hi, Mel.
Good evening.
So I just want just a small bit of clarification after Jason. We talked about that increase that we did to residential and non-residential and the increased revenue that it would bring in.
Right.
And as well as this being approximately, you said 150,000 extra revenue?
Well, it was accounted for within the budget already.
Okay, so is that decreasing that amount that we're taking from reserves or not?
No, not
So
not
this isn't
additional.
even impacting that?
That's correct. That amount of $800,000 is including
This
this
increase.
additional revenue. This was part of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson?
If you're ready, Your Worship, I'm prepared to move a motion.
Yeah, if I could just make one
Yeah,
comment, that
absolutely.
would be great. Thank you, Mel, for your presentation, and I know this is another bitter pill for people to swallow, but in essence, it helps us to try to stay away from using reserves. We're trying to become a council that doesn't use reserves as much as we can. We're trying to stay away from that. And as far as being able to have better long-range financial planning, being able to consider franchise fees, because we have so few revenue streams that we can use. This has to be one of the ones we consider as far as helping us maintain our budgets and still provide services to people. So I realize this is a little bit of a bitter pill for people. We all will be facing it, but at least it's a small one, and we're trying to keep us consistent with other communities. So thank you for this. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move that the franchise fee for electricity be adjusted to 15% and that the change be advertised for 2 consecutive weeks as required, and that the CAO be authorized to make application for the revision of the rate with FortisAlberta.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. You've all heard the motion.
Just to speak to the motion, Your Worship, I think that Councillor Montgomery, made a good point when he talks about that Leviathan effect, where the beast kind of feeds itself. But I think what happens ultimately in this is that it all trickles down to the taxpayer, and the efforts of this council to do that long-term planning under Mel's direction is a new undertaking, and one that's highly responsible and receptive. And it's no longer reactive, it's proactive. In the end, I think it's going to keep us from facing high tax increases like our neighbors have faced, those in the 6% realm. We've been able to avoid that for many years before I was on council. And I think that if we, I understand that this is going to be a $26 a year hit to residences, but it's far preferable to being reactive in the marketplace when things are so uncertain. And I do believe that in answer to Councillor Montgomery's question, that ultimately it'll be taxpayers that will pay the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Are there any opposed? No, the motion is carried. Which brings us to item 7.2, natural gas franchise fee 2018, and Mel is speaking on that again.
Thank you. The 2018 long-term financial plan and the 2018 town budget included provisions for adjustments to the natural gas franchise fee. The current franchise fee for natural gas to the town is 17.22% and raised $443,800 in revenue for the town in 2017 and $305,500 in 2016. Revising the franchise fee rate to 20% would increase the average monthly residential franchise fee from $7.49 per month to $8.59 per month, an increase of $1.10. This is based on an average residential use of 120 gigajoules per year. Franchise fees are paid by all utility customers, all provincially funded institutional schools, seniors lodges, and seniors lodges pay no property taxes. Franchise fees and utilities are the only source of revenue from provincially funded institutions for the town. Those are my comments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mel. Are there any questions or comments from councillors? Then I'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the franchise fee for the natural gas be adjusted to 20% and that this change be advertised for 2 consecutive weeks as required, and that the CAO be authorized to make application to ATCO Gas and Pipelines Ltd. For the revision of the natural gas franchise fee.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. You've all heard the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Cox?
Do we know how much this is going to increase? Did you figure that one out as well?
Yeah.
$13.26.
Yeah. And it works out to $1.10 per month.
What is the total amount that the town will
26,
get back though
28,
in increase?
26, 28 per household.
Sorry?
Sorry.
Councillor Montgomery?
Just like, do you know what the actual amount is that the town will see the increase of if we increase to 20%?
Total amount of revenue?
That was the
50,000.
150,000 combined for both.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
And if you put in, I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Councillor
And
Peterson?
I think if you put in the 2 increases for the following 2 years, it works out to about 210,000 over the 3 years, at the end of the 3 years in total, something like that. When we were budgeting on ours, might be a little bit more.
I'm not sure it's quite that amount.
It might be lower.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery, did you?
I just like one thing, Mel. Would you mind at some point getting me the actual formula that's used to apply this? Just because, like I said, when I was researching it, I saw like one that was a common one that was just based on the distribution, which does account for the use as well. But so I would like to know, I guess, what the actual formula is that we apply to figure this out.
On the individual bills?
Well, like I said, when I was kind of researching this, it said that like at least like a lot of municipalities in the province, you just apply this to the distribution charge, and then the distribution charge, when I looked at that, say for Fortis, they apply, I think it's about a 2 cent per kilowatt hour distribution charge to the amount that you use in power. So like if you were just doing the franchise fee to the distribution charge, that would also account for the use as well. So I was curious as to what our actual formula was. And if at any point, like the near future, if you could get that to me, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. You've all heard the motion on the floor from Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? And there's no opposed, so the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Brings us to item 7.3, the Cemetery Master Plan. The report author coming, it's from Legislative Services, Jennifer Sawatsky, if you could, is Mr. speaking on this?
Jen will start it off.
Okay,
We're going to tag team this one, Your Worship.
thank you.
So in 2016, Council authorized administration through the budget to prepare a master plan for the Strathmore Cemetery. This plan was brought to Council earlier this year to a committee of the whole meeting to get input from Council on some things that they would like to see included in the plan. The plan is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is upgrades to the existing cemetery. The second is an expansion to the west, and the third is an expansion to the east. Within all 3 phases, all 3 phases include columbarium walls, urn ash plots, traditional burial plots, as well as gardens and reflection areas. The existing cemetery upgrade that you see in front of you also includes a memorial wall, as well as washroom and water access facilities. And we've also included in this section a wayfinding kiosk and an entry feature. So that what you have in front of you is the plan for the existing upgrades. The next slide. So this is the plan for the expansion to the west. This expansion also includes, as mentioned, the columbarium walls, the urn ash plots, traditional burial plots, and as well as gardens and reflection areas. This phase also has an additional access to the cemetery, and it is connected through a trail connection to the existing cemetery as well. And then this is the final phase of the expansion, which is the expansion to the east. This phase includes all the upgrades as the other phases, but it also includes an ash garden, which is that area labeled as A to the east side of the expansion. And it also includes parking and access to that section of the cemetery as well, which will also be connected through a trail connection to the existing site. So that is the, sorry, there are some pictures. I forgot about the pictures. So these are some visuals of what we mean, and you can kind of envision what some of that would look like. So at the top there we have kind of that curved traditional burial area. There's some gardens, and then there's also the urn ash plots kind of at the very, very bottom of that slide. And then these are some examples of some spaces that can be done for columbarium walls. There's a concept sketch at the top there. That could be something that the existing cemetery site could be upgraded to. And then there's a lot of different features and a lot of different plans, I guess, that you can do with those. Sorry, next slide. And then here's some garden spaces and some examples of urn ash, ash gardens that are also referenced in the expansion. And then finally, this is just a concept of our wayfinding information center, as well as some other reflection spaces and some garden spaces. So that is the plan that we're providing to council. We're asking for council's approval of the plan so that we may move forward with engineering, which we have budgeted for this year.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess my first question would be how, so this master plan is obviously going to be rolled out in these particular phases. What would be the timeline for, say, completing the first phase, and then would the second phase be on a timeline, or is it, once we hit a certain population size?
It'll be based on area. So once you get to a certain point where you don't have enough burial space, we move on to the phase 2, which is to the west. We have asked the consultant to incorporate that as part of the engineering services, just to see when the trigger points are when we go to phase 2 and phase 3.
Okay. And so phase 1, you said we do have the money set aside for phase 1, or just the engineering of it?
So in our 3-year, in the next 3 years, so this year we have budgeted for engineering, and in 2019 we do have a recommendation for budgeting for the expansion to the west.
Oh, for phase 2?
Phase 2, yes.
Okay. And I guess, so if we approve this, is there going to be a chance to change this in the future if we decide?
Change it how?
Like let's say we decide that, we I don't know, like, we don't want to be in the cemetery business anymore, and, you know, so can we just say, okay, we're gonna stop with, you know, 2 phases or something like that?
Through your worship, that is always at council's discretion to decide what they would like to do with town facilities.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, and I don't know if this needs to be like a directive to administration, but can we get a cost recovery and operational cost analysis for the proposed plans? Like, just so we know how much this is gonna cost to maintain, staffing, and even, yeah, like, just as far as like how much money we're gonna make back on selling plots, on selling pieces of it. I just wanna know, I guess, yeah, like, you know, we're not gonna be just pouring a ton, because this looks, you know, it looks nice, it looks very expensive. And I, you know, I would hate to kind of, you know, like, we just, you know, I appreciate Mel's concern for, you know, raising revenues, and I'm equally concerned with kind of, you know, controlling costs. So, I guess, yeah, I just wanna make sure that things are gonna work out, well, let's say.
So,
Mr. Thackeray?
yeah, we're doing an actuarial. So we are intent on doing an actuarial because we want actual full cost recovery, because we're losing money. It's a funny thing about local government. We're in the business of services that lose a lot of money, and we have to stop the hemorrhaging, and this is one area where we can at least provide a cost recovery model. So we run at least break even and put some money away for the preservation and operations of the cemetery. And that gives us the ability to make sure that when we do subsidize other programs and services, it allows us to be focused on that.
So will you be looking at a fee change in the future then, as far as what we?
Yes, there will be fee changes in the future. We don't have that yet. We don't have the information yet, but it will be coming forward. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councilor Montgomery?
Well, full cost recovery is music to my ears, so thank you very much, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Councilor Cox?
Sorry. At the very beginning of the presentation, I believe she said, or Jen said that there would be a washroom. And did I understand, like, water fountain, so on and so forth?
So I can answer that. So,
Okay, sorry.
when we brought this forward to council at committee, the whole council asked for access to water for family visiting, to water flowers and you know, things like that. So, there is a plan to include, along with a washroom facility, water availability in the same kind of unit, is the plan.
Okay, so just as a further information, it's just for watering plants, not actual drinking water?
Water access.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cox. Councilor Montgomery?
I don't want to, I guess, step on Councillor Sobel's toes here, but would it be possible for us to, we have maybe like put a temporary water source in, like possibly like a trailer or something like that, just for the next year?
Yes, we have talked about this, putting out like a barrel with water for people to access is absolutely possible.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, Councillor Corbeil?
Nothing, thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to make the motion that council adopt the cemetery master plan as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And just to wrap up, Jen and Mustafa, I'd like to thank you and the rest of the staff for working so hard on this. I appreciate the respect and care you've done, and I think it's one of these things that's going to add to families, and it's going to add to the town. Thank you. Which brings us to item 8, committee reports, 8.1, reports from councillors from committees on which they sit. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine is more a question. I just wanted to make sure that we had received the marigold levy. Has that should have come in? And then my second follow-up question for legislative services would be, could we prepare a notice of motion for that? Because you should have received it. You received it. And so maybe 2 weeks from now, we could do a notice of motion on the levy? Have you already paid it? Oh, well, good work.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a written report that I will read. On September 6, 2017, council was asked to approve a project brought to them by the town's Traffic Advisory Committee, on which I sit. The project involved the completion of a grant application to the Provincial Alberta Traffic Safety Fund in the amount of $15,300. With council approval, the committee got to work and provided input, which resulted in the application being forwarded in November of last year. I'm pleased to announce that I received word from the Alberta Safety Fund manager on February 20th, that's yesterday, that the committee's application had been approved. The monies received will be focused on a project called Keeping Our Youth Safe. It will deal primarily with dramatically increasing the awareness of motorists in school and playground zones through visual methods, thereby reducing speed and increasing safety. The project will involve 1, purchasing and installing 48 brightly colored traffic sign sleeves, which will go around all school and playground zone signs. 2, purchasing 2 solar traffic radar devices to be used exclusively in our playground and school zones. And 3, repainting the crosswalks in school areas with different colored paint in an effort to bring more attention to them. I would like to congratulate both our committee and this council for recognizing and working towards a project which could very well make a difference for the safety of those using these areas. That's my report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Cox, and then Councillor Peterson.
I just want to respond to
Oh,
Councillor Sobel.
Councillor Peterson, sure.
As somebody who was in charge of safety patrol for many, many years, I cannot thank you enough because although, we don't see many actual prosecutions in terms of violations, I can't tell you how many close calls there are. Congratulations to your committee and the work you've done. It's such a good thing.
I'll make sure to
Thank
pass
you,
that on.
Councillor Peterson. And I echo that. Thank you for your work and the work of your committees and committee. Councillor Cox.
I also echo that, and I did notice that we do have one of those solar signs already down by Kinsman Lake.
The speed, okay, so those are,
Separate?
if I may just respond, yeah, those are ones that were purchased by the town, and they were purchased for different zones, but these 2 will be only used for speed in the school and playground zones. That's the only place they're going to be able to be used. So there'll be, it's possible we may have 2 going at one time, but we'll have at least 2 going in our playground and school zones in our community at any one time. And of course, there's other
So
areas.
these are movable?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
So
the
these
one
2
that
would
I
be in
seen-
addition to the
It's
ones you're
movable.
seeing.
Yeah, yeah. And
What
that
I
can be
seen
big.
isn't movable, it's,
No, it should be movable. Yep.
Should be.
The ones that we own are movable.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, they can be
So the
placed-
2 he's speaking of
Ones by
would be
Kendall
in
Park,
addition.
It
Yeah,
looks really
those are 2 new ones.
oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you for that. I was just going to report that my last committee meeting was Tuesday night with Community Futures, and we had a strategic planning meeting. It went extremely well. It was a nice evening, and we're partway through our strategic planning. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. If I could just add a couple of things, I went to the CRP meeting, and it's, as you all know, it's in the process of shutting down. There's one more breakfast meeting on February 28th. Again, as far as winding everything up before the Growth Management Board starts up. I also wanted to thank Councillors Bauer and Peterson for inviting me and letting me attend the overnight shelter board meeting last Saturday. The board is to be commended for all their work on bringing the overnight shelter very close to being ready to open. And I appreciate the time and effort they put in. They meet at 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings, which is amazing to me still. If I could just make one twice a month, yes, twice a month they meet at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning. The coldest night of the year walk is coming this Saturday, so I'm hoping that if anyone's free, they would like to attend. We'll be meeting at 4 p.m. at the overnight shelter. It starts there, doesn't it? I think Richard said it did.
You can go online.
Okay.
Go online to the coldest night of the year, Strathmore
Okay.
there. And there's supper served after.
Thank you. So a great event to help fundraise and raise awareness for the overnight shelter. It'll be this Saturday. As Councillor Peterson said, you can find that information on the website. But I'll be there for sure because Councillor Peterson has shamed me into walking. So thank you, and I'll be looking for a motion to accept the reports as information. Councillor Cox.
I so move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Which brings us to item 9, items directly related to council. I don't think we have anything there. Number 10, bylaws. 10.1, the downtown barking? You think you're going to get through a meeting, no hitches. 10.1 downtown parking hours bylaw amendment, page 33. Jennifer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration is bringing forward an amendment to the traffic bylaw number 0618 to change 2-hour parking to 3-hour parking in the downtown core. For a number of years, parking in the downtown core has been limited to 2 hours in a number of areas. Traffic control devices are installed in different areas of the downtown core, indicating this time limit to maintain compliance of the 2-hour parking zone. A number of downtown businesses have expressed the desire to extend this limit to 3 hours, as they've indicated that customers should have more time to shop in the downtown area. Councillor Sobel was provided with a petition from various business owners requesting the removal of the restricted parking in the downtown. In late 2017, Councillor Sobel gave a notice of motion that he would be bringing forward a motion to change the parking from 2 hours to 3 hours. At the January 10th, 2018 council meeting, council passed a resolution to extend the parking limit and also instructed administration to bring back a bylaw amendment for this change. Council also heard from another business owner on February 7th who was not in favor of extending the parking to 3 hours, and we've attached that letter to this report for council's review. We're now bringing forward the bylaw amendment as instructed for council to make a decision. If council so approves, we're recommending for a second and third reading this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there any discussion? Any comments? Councillor Sobel?
Sure. I'll make my final comments on this issue. In spite of the fact that I was not present for the last 2 council meetings as a result of a family holiday, I've kept track of many issues that have come to us, including the one dealing with downtown parking. How this matter came before us. Although I was the driving force for this matter to come to council for various discussions and a couple of decisions in the past, I did not do this of my own accord. Anyone who was present at the May 2017 downtown seminar hosted by the town would have heard a number of interested business people discuss the woes of having a 2-hour parking limitation. This was yet another example of our town reaching out to obtain feedback from our downtown business people. If present, you would have heard these individuals speak about how this is negatively affecting their business. This led to some interested and active individuals to begin an informal petition which, while neither containing all the names of business owners or even being a legal document, certainly left a great deal of credibility to the fact that many find a 2-hour parking limit too restrictive. Their position, as indicated by the petition, is that there should be no restrictions whatsoever. I first introduced the idea of a 4-hour parking limit and now the 3, with the concept of it being a compromise. A compromise of having no restriction to one that would deal with some of the issues that some business people are dealing with in regards to losing customers. I realize that a big hurdle is having business owners and employees taking up the good spots as an issue. But quite honestly, I feel this is something for business owners to deal with themselves. My focus here is simple. We continue to spend a great deal of money in an effort to revitalize our downtown and to attract new businesses. Should we not be doing something which clearly sends the message that our downtown is open for business and that as a shopper, you should feel comfortable with spending your time there? Many comments have been made in regards to the fact that there's a limited amount of businesses that could or would take advantage of a 3-hour parking restriction. But I look at the list that was provided of the businesses in the quote-unquote whatever this is, list of people who wanted the change in the parking. And I see at least, quickly, just two, including the addictions and mental health individuals that signed this, and the Orange Jigsaw Real Estate Company. And when you think about it, both these companies would benefit from having their customers stick around for a little longer than 2 hours, possibly. So, in conclusion, I think this is something that I don't think is going to hurt anyone greatly. We're not cutting out our parking restrictions. It's going to 3 hours from 2. It's going to help a bunch of people, and I just find it hard to believe that this is going to cause such grievance among any of the businesses downtown. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Sobel. I don't see that a 3-hour parking increase to 3 hours is going to hurt. My concern is this going to come back to us in 6 months?
Councillor Sobel, did you want to respond at all? No.
He doesn't have
I guess we'll have no idea if that'll come forward, and hopefully the business owners will continue to work to get some kind of strong consensus.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson?
In answer to Councillor Cox's question, in my 4.5 years, this is the 6th time that parking issue has come forward, and God bless Councillor Sobel for always trying to fix things that are not good. And I think that it isn't, but one of the things that I noticed about the petition, and I really appreciate that Councillor Sobel brought this forward and said, yeah, no, it's not a valid, but it is. But one of the things that I really noticed when I looked at it was that there were people on here that are no longer businesses in the downtown, and it's not dated, and that there were some very obvious omissions. Possibly 3 of the busiest businesses, the Strathmore Value Drug Mart, the Chinook Credit Union, and Strathmore Florist are not on the list. And one of the things that, and I really agree with Councillor Sobel when he says that it would be nice if this was settled. And one of the ways that I'd like to see it settled would be that either the Downtown Business Association through Chamber or some other, come up with, with a 75% consensus, with a legitimate petition, and they present it before this council as a done deal, that this is what they all want, this is what they can all live with, with some significant majority. And then I would be more comfortable moving forward, knowing that it's not going to come back to us every 6 months. And so I think that, at this time, I'm not in favor of the bylaw amendment, but I certainly would be open to looking at it a 7th time.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Cox?
I just wanted to clarify, I think we already discussed this once, but we already have purchased stickers?
Which is a little forward.
Yes, sorry. What, I'm not,
The answer is yes, we have purchased the stickers, and we've also purchased 10 additional signs for 2nd Avenue that were taken down but not put back up, that were purchased with 3 hours on it. And we purchased them, and I believe the total cost of all the signs and the stickers is just under $250.
thank you, Mark.
And if we don't, we can reuse the signs. We can just put new stickers. We'll have to buy some more $2 stickers to change it from 3 to 2, so we can make that happen as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Montgomery?
So I guess my first comment will be in response to Mark. So I guess who will be putting those stickers up for free then? Well, I'm pointing out that it's not just the cost of the signs and the stickers, right? It's the man hours to go and change stuff.
Correct. We do have our public works people that are here for snow removal, so we would move them when they're not moving snow removal at this time of the year. So we'd use those. The 10 signs on on Second Ave, regardless of the 3 hour or 2 hours, those need to be installed. Because those were installed previously and have not been, they have to be reestablished. So that cost is not, it's just the actual stairs.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to make a couple comments, I guess. So one is like, I don't agree with the petition asking to remove time-restricted parking downtown. I think it's impractical and does not demonstrate or protect the value of the spaces to the health and of all the businesses and economic activity downtown. And when you look at the makeup of the people that have signed this petition, you can kind of figure out that these people are not signing it because their clientele are affected by the time restrictions so much as they might be affected by not being able to park when they go to work on the street. So I guess it kind of comes down to, you know, like, do we want the street parking to be for people that work at these businesses? And, you know, I'll give you, like, I guess a couple of examples, you know, like the liquor store, for instance. I don't think anyone's going there for 2+ hours. You know, and the comic book store, Wheatland, you know, like most of the people that have signed this, you know, they don't work at businesses that would require.
There's no comic book store, it's gone.
Well, that's another thing too. That's gone, obviously, and so it's, and I think that we, like I said, we need to basically understand that there's value to these parking spaces, and we need to apply some sort of value to that. And at this point, we can't. I don't believe we can charge for it, and nor would I recommend that. But by just removing all regulation, we're basically saying that the parking spaces are totally valueless, and I don't believe that's what we should be communicating. And I guess like one crazy idea that you know, like maybe could be proposed is, you know, we could go to a block, you know, say of Third Ave that is 3 hours or something like that, and leave other parts 2 hours. You know, like I don't think we necessarily have to have a blanket time limit on the parking downtown. Because, you know, like in front of the drugstore, for instance, you do want short-term parking there. But, you know, if all the businesses on, say, Third Ave want 3 hour, then, you know, I'd be more amenable to that. But as it stands, I don't think I can support moving to 3 hour parking for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I disagree. I think some of these businesses do need it. I notice a lot of these are, or I shouldn't say a lot of them, but some of them that are in the Hilton Plaza, they don't need that parking. They're not signing this because they want the parking out for them front. A lot of these are business owners that want it for their clients, and I think a lot of the businesses, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the businesses on here need it for their business. They need it changed because 2 hours is not long enough. I know you're not going to please everybody. You're not. I know that the Drug Mart wants short-term parking because the flow and the traffic that comes through their building, you know, they need it. But I disagree. I do think that a lot of these need it for their business. It's not for themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Councillor Cox.
I actually am going to agree with Councillor Corbeil. There's 6 hair salons on here that do require more than 2 hour parking. There's 2 dental offices. There's also 3 real estate offices that park their car and they go out to look at houses. 3 hours might be more reasonable. So I do disagree with you, Councillor Montgomery, as far as I don't see a lot of these that actually are there to park for themselves. There are a few that I see that I don't really think they would require anything, but I don't honestly see any harm in moving to 3 hours from 2 hours.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson.
I just have a question, Your Worship. I'm not speaking to the issue again. I'd asked administration to look into how many citations were handed out year over year around parking violations over the 3 years. 7, yeah. That was my information too. Thank you. So,
Thank-
so if we, that's how many, like 2.37 a year?
Thank you, Councillor Sobel.
Just, I know I said I wasn't going to comment anymore, but here I am. But just in regards to that, and I think the enforcement and the parking tickets, I really believe that's a red herring. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The vast majority of people will obey a traffic sign. And I've heard from business owners who've said, you know, I'd like to stick around, but my 2 hours is up, I got to go. We know that unless there's a complaint, bylaw's not going to go, but people will not break laws. The majority of people will obey the law and will adhere to whatever the time restriction is. That comes from my experience as a peace officer and from talking to people. There is respect for our laws from the vast majority of our population, so.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Any other comments? If I could just add something. First of all, I'd like to commend previous councillors and this council for all the time and effort they've put in over the last 7 years trying to help and improve the downtown business area, and we're hoping to continue it, but I must admit I've grown a bit weary of the discussion about parking. And as I said, we've done a lot over the past 7 years, and when I look at the petition, yeah, there are some things there's a couple of businesses that are no longer there, but this is the closest we have to some sort of idea as far as how these downtown businesses feel about the parking time. So I guess I'll be, as far as clarification as we move forward, Jen, I just want to look at, we're voting to approve the amendment that's coming to us next week? And what are we doing here? It's discussion.
No, Your Worship, you have a bylaw before you, and you'll be giving the
Okay.
recommendation is to give 3 readings.
Okay, thank you. That's what I had missed here. Thank you.
I just have another
Sorry.
question. Your Worship.
Councillor Peterson?
That is, do we have any kind of restriction for the sort of form that came forward in this state coming before council when it's not, when it clearly isn't, doesn't have legitimacy? It would just be a lot cleaner if it did. And I also noticed, Your Worship, that 11 of these signatures are from addiction and mental health. And having worked in that environment, I've never seen a 2-hour appointment in my life, let alone a 3-hour one. But, so I found that a little bit surprising too. So I think that in the future, council needs to be really judicious when it comes to accepting documents like this and using them and referencing them in our decisions around bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that we give the downtown parking bylaw amendment first reading.
Thank you,
Do I need
Councillor
more?
Cox.
Sorry, Your Worship. Can we have clarification that it's the bylaw number 1804
yes.
traffic bylaw, please?
I knew you were going to say that. Your Worship, I'd like to start again.
Sure.
I move that council give first reading to bylaw number 18-04, traffic bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? Opposed? We have 2 opposed. This is a first for us. So Jen, if I can get clarification, if we've approved it by a 3-2 or 4-2, it passes. So then Councillor Cox.
Your Worship, I move that we give second reading to bylaw number 18-04, traffic bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cox. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? All opposed? So we have 2 opposed, 4. And then we're looking for a motion to go for unanimous. We need a unanimous motion to have a request for third reading, is that correct? To pass it tonight. So we're looking for a motion. Councillor Sobel, thank you.
I would move that council give unanimous consent to bylaw number 18-04, traffic bylaw amendment bylaw.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? So the third reading then will have to go over to next public meeting. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for all your time and patience and your good thoughts and good comments. Which brings us to item 11, urgent business. I don't think we have anything. Item 12, questions between councillors and/or council statements. Administrative inquiries. Jen.
Thank you, Worship. We have one administrative inquiry from Councillor Corbeil in regards to traffic signs. There are two traffic signs I'm inquiring about. First, the speed sign displays speed a car is going at the Sacred Heart School and the Splash Park. It is right at the crosswalk, and I feel someone might get hurt. I find it distracting, and I am looking at that sign rather than looking for pedestrians crossing or wanting to cross. Second, heading east on Park Lane Drive towards Edgefield, George Freeman Trail isn't very visible, especially if there is a truck parked along the road. The stop sign is pretty much hidden.
Thank you. So Jen?
Your Worship, I would ask, through the chair to Councillor Corbeil, just clarification on what information you would like back from the inquiry.
Can we get, I'm not sure, is there anything that we can do, like especially for that one? If you just take a drive or whatever, I just about went right through it actually. Is there anything that we could do to make even that stop sign bigger?
Or to highlight it,
Yeah,
it's
something,
at,
like, yeah.
it's at the east end of Park Lane Drive where it meets George Freeman Trail.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
especially-
looking for a report to come forward to us at the next public meeting?
If maybe I'm not the only one. I've had a couple people actually approach me on that one.
If I might just speak to.
Councillor Peterson?
I had a call just before, so I didn't have time to put it in an inquiry, but I had a call about the George Freeman one just on the way to the meeting tonight, and it was just an inquiry to our, the road clearing, but also the size of the sign, and also on the intersection by the car wash and Center Street, that area, that there is no visibility because of the windrows, in addition to the GTF.
Thank you. Then just for clarification, Councillor Corbeil, would you like some sort of report brought forward as far as those two concerns you have?
If they could just look and see if there's anything that they would suggest that is a little bit better, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Montgomery, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, on February 8th, I had emailed admin about some admin inquiries that I had. There was 4 of them. Yeah. It was because it was after the last council meeting, so we haven't had a meeting since then.
Jennifer?
No, sorry, just for clarification, are you looking for responses to those?
No, I just hadn't heard them actually like kind of
Oh, okay.
submitted formally.
Your Worship, can administration have one moment, please, to gather those inquiries?
Okay. So do you want to, you need a motion for a quick recess?
I so move that, Your Worship.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion for a recess. All in favor? We'll take a 5-minute recess. No.
You don't need a vote on that. I don't think you need a vote on it.
swing on at the aquatic center, preferably during the planned work that will be done in the same area in the near future. Third inquiry, our online pool schedule is not user-friendly and needs to be reformatted. Can we find and implement a better model that is easily understood and accurate? And the fourth is, what is the estimated time frame that the new communications policy person will be taking to formulate the policy? And how soon after will the position be planned to be terminated?
Can you tell I've been to the pool lately?
Councillor Montgomery, was that your comment?
Yeah. Oh, and just like as far as like, I guess like, so one thing I find, and this is what I've heard from people is confusing about the pool schedule is that, you know, you look at like say the kids pool, for instance, and it'll say, you know, it's open from, you know, whatever, like let's say 9 to, you know, 10:20, and then it's, you know, and then it shows like it's open from, you know, say noon to 1 or something like that. But then if you look at the other one where it says all pools, you know, it's open all day. So it's like, you know, why would they have it kind of closed? So like, and something I've heard as well is like, it would be like having, if you could just say that the kids pool is open all day long, basically, it would just basically provide people a guarantee that no matter when they went there, they could always bring their kids there at any time of day and they could go swimming, as opposed to, you know, like having to like worry about, oh, is it, because like I don't think most people like care if the big pool is open necessarily all day, but having the hot tub and the other one open would be just provide kind of like, I think, some stability almost. Yep.
I understand that, in talking with Natasha, because they're bringing the new stuff online, the new steam room and so forth, that they're looking at doing, what's the word, co-programming. So along that line of thinking, well, there will still be clubs in the pool, but you'll be able to go have a steam room and go up, take your kids and go play in the little pool and stuff like that, so.
So like, do you know if it's possible to have the kids pool open basically from the time the pool opens to the time the pool closes?
Can I ask the lifeguards first, or do you?
I can answer that.
Do you have that? Okay.
So we can't guarantee that the kiddie pool and the hot tub will be open every hour of operation. We do have to factor in maintenance times and backwash times for the water, and that's why we schedule close time during the day. And that's why it's built into the schedule. We can definitely find a way to communicate it in a more effective manner, but there are times during the day where we have to limit access.
Is it
to certain
possible to
bodies of
like
water.
do that at like the end of the day, like in the last hour or something like that?
Not necessarily all the time. We always try to do our maintenance outside of busy times, but they don't always align. Sometimes it depends on bather loads. Sometimes it depends on what kind of people or groups were in the pool. It also then has to be flexible based on contamination in the water.
Do you know what time they do it now? Because like I noticed like that it's closed, or at least on the schedule it says, you know, like around noon, or like, you know, just before noon it's closed, and then like, you know, like shortly after lunch it's closed again. And
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what time they do maintenance, but we can get that information. I do know that they do look at their traffic patterns, and they try to pick the most convenient times for the public to close.
okay,
Thank you, Tracy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Thackeray, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
Nope. And did you have another admin inquiry? Okay, so that deals with all the administration or the administrative inquiries. And we're looking for a motion to go in camera to relate to an item, FOIP Section 24, Local Public Body Conferences. Confidence is a motion to go in camera. Councillor Peterson?
So move, your worship.
You've all heard the motion to go in camera. All in favor? We are now in camera at 9:06 PM.